Hi, I'm Gail Z and it's Halloween, so I figured it's time for a good spooky story. This is Old Nonna, and it originally appeared in The Big Bad 2 from Falstaff Books, and kind of a nice, scary, spooky story for Halloween. The decrepit house trailer sat in the thick woods, halfway back in the hollow of two deep mountain clefts. Only in these parts, folks called it the holler, making a distinction between those who lived in the front of the holler, who might be approachable, and those who lived in the back of the holler, who made themselves difficult to find for a reason. Going from the front of the holler to the back was not a wise thing to do. Those who tried rarely came out. The old woman never let that bother her. She went where she pleased, when it pleased her to go anywhere, which was not often. Her beat-up house trailer might have been blue and white when it was new, long ago, when the very first house trailers were made. It sat up on metal stilts without even the dignity to draw skirts of cement block or latticed wood around its base to hide its scrawny metal legs. The sun had faded the blue metal and yellowed what used to be white. Moss grew on the north side, green and black and thick. Old chintz curtains covered the windows, and nobody could remember ever seeing the curtains opened. Then again, few people dared come close enough to take a look. She lived there, in the house trailer in the middle of the holler, halfway in and halfway out. No one could remember a time when she didn't live there, although the old folks swore that many years ago, the old woman had a shack on stilts instead of a trailer. When did she come to the holler? No one knew. Long, long ago. Maybe just after the fingers of God pushed down through the land and raised the mountains, leaving the deep clefts like clay squashed beneath a mighty hand. She had always been there and always would be, and the holler was hers. Some called her Old Nonna, and some the Witch of the Holler. Most called her nothing at all, except when they whispered about the old woman with her big nose and ragged clothing and tumble-down trailer on its spindly legs deep in the forest, and warned their children to stay clear. Now and again, some drunk fool would four-wheel his pickup to the end of the dirt road and stagger into the deep woods to see the witch. Folks thereabout would find the truck after a while, but never the fool who dared to disturb the witch. Oh, there were rumors. Over the years, the tales grew with the telling. Miners and loggers came from all over to work the land near Old Nonna's holler. They deep mined and strip mined and shaft mined, clear cut the forests and hauled away the trees. Hard work done by desperate men who brought their own legends with them, and some of them swore they knew the witch from the deep forests of the darkest reaches of the old world. They called her by many names: Babushka, Nagimama, Bobute, Nain, Babka, Abuela, Oma. And they told stories about her, the old woman who never came and never left, the hag of the holler, the witch. They told stories about children who wandered into the forest and were never seen again, eaten, no doubt, by Old Nonna. Tales of how the wolves followed Old Nonna like pet dogs and did her bidding. Dark tellings about loggers or miners who thought that an old woman wouldn't stop them from taking the riches of the wild holler lands and who vanished from the face of the earth. After a while, and enough dead men, people left the holler and its witch alone. To some, that made Old Nonna a hero, the crone queen who stood up to King Cold. There were whispers that Old Nonna did not eat everyone who came to her holler. Sometimes, if her mood was generous and the wanderer was pure of heart and desperately needy, Old Nonna took him to a better place where nothing dared hurt him again. No one knew for sure, because no one ever came back. Old Nonna cared little what people said, so long as it kept them away. She had lived in her holler for as long as time remembered, and she would live there after time forgot. Each day passed much like the others. Even a witch like Old Nonna has chores to do: food to cook, tea to boil, wood to chop. Once a day, Old Nonna would walk to the back of her lawn where the creek ran deep. She had a round, bowl-like boat that could float down the creek to the back of the holler, and a long willow oar to pole her way along the shallows. When the water was swift and deep from snows in the high hills, Old Nonna swiftly traversed the water, and the woodland creatures heard her cackle with the wild power of the ride. No one came to the back of the holler. At least, no one came twice. Old Nonna's children lived in the shadows and thick forest of the deep cleft in the high hills. Decrepit mobile homes, just as old as Nonna's house, sat back from the creek, hauled in long ago. A few cabins, even older, squatted at the foothills of the mountain. Deep beneath everything were the caves, miles and miles of twisting passages no one had mapped. No one, except for the children of Old Nonna. Only a few dared to make the trek to see Old Nonna anymore. Some were curiosity seekers who wanted to catch the old witch on film and brag about their nerve. These old Nonna killed straight away. Ignoring them led to more foolishness. If they never returned, their disappearances served as a warning. She knew that many of the noisy, ignorant people outside the holler would blame those missing people on mudslides and falling rocks, wild animals, and rough terrain. Others would understand and know that the old woman in the holler was not to be trifled with. Once in a while, a kindred soul made its way to old Nonna. Outcast, hurt, and hungry, only the truly desperate would risk their lives to beg a favor of the woman in the woods. Each time, old Nonna listened carefully, able to tell truth from a lie. Her large nose let her sniff out falsehood, and her wandering eye, the one that turned out and gazed outside this world, saw what was concealed. If the soul was pure and the need was dire, old Nonna would offer to take the petitioner into her family, the kindred at the back of the holler. She offered sanctuary, but no return. The back of the holler changed a person. It was better for everyone if those in the holler stayed in the holler. Tonight, old Nonna swept her stoop and sniffed the air. The scent was distant, but clear enough. She turned her wandering eye to the heavens and saw. Her thin lips stretched across broken brown teeth. She could smell the hunt. Toward the front of the holler, she heard the baying of dogs. From the back of the holler, the howl of wolves warned their canine brethren to keep their distance. The dogs would be wise enough to heed the warning, old Nonna knew. Men would not. And tonight, a wanderer would come, perhaps more than one. Old Nonna would be ready. Anna Sophia had heard about old Nonna, or as her mother said it, Bruja Nonna. Anna Sophia's family had come to these parts for work and stayed because the work they found paid too little for them to go elsewhere. Anna Sophia could work hard, even when her belly was empty. Just 16, she had been working since she was just a child, always for too little and never on the books. It was better here, her papa said, than where they came from, away from the drug wars and their bloody lords, the desert that swallowed up hundreds of young women in unmarked graves, the corrupt politicians, and the even more corrupt policia. Her papa said that, Anna Sophia thought, to feel better about where they ended up. It wasn't good, but maybe there were worse things somewhere else. Perhaps, but Anna Sophia doubted it, especially after the night La Migra came. Anna Sophia and her family heard the shouting. They ran into the woods, leaving everything behind. Not that there was much. La Migra came at supper time when people were tired and hungry, just getting home after a long day of work in the kitchens and hotels, the mines and the construction sites. They came with their black clothing and big guns, kicking indoors and shooting the dogs that barked at them. Anna Sophia ran barefoot into the night, and in the forest she lost sight of her family. She hid in the darkness and heard as the agents caught her papa and her mama, heard her younger brothers and sisters shriek with fear. When her father shouted at the agents at the top of his lungs, cursing them, she knew he was warning her away, telling her to keep on running. Chinga la migra, she thought as she ran. Chinga la migra. She ran until her chest ached like fire and her feet were cut and bleeding. She ran with tears streaming down her face, begging La Madre de Dios to have pity on her, to remember what it was to be a stranger in a strange land, an outcast without papers or pity. She prayed to La Virgen, and she found La Bruja. Anna Sophia ran until she could run no more. She stumbled into the small clearing, hungry and hurt and frightened beyond reason. In the distance, far back in the holler, she heard wolves howl. It was dark, and she was lost, and it didn't matter that she couldn't find the way home. There was no home left, nowhere to go. The battered old trailer sat alone in the woods, smoke rising from its crooked chimney, perched on rickety metal legs that reminded Anna Sophia of the chickens her mother kept. The chickens, who would care for them now, she wondered. Another sob rose and she stifled the sound. The old trailer's windows glowed from inside, warm and bright. Anna Sophia could smell something cooking, and her stomach growled and twisted. She was so hungry, so tired, so frightened and miserable that at first she did not recognize where she was. And then, as she realized that she stood before the home of old Nonna, Anna Sophia trembled. The door to the old trailer opened, and a bent old woman with a large nose came to the door. She wore a cheap, stained housecoat with a dirty apron tied over it, and her hair was tied up in a cloth. Heavy knee-high stockings sagged down her bony legs, wrinkling above her ugly black shoes. Her dark eyes scanned the night, and as Anna Sophia shivered in the shadows, old Nonna raised her head like a cur and sniffed the air. "Come closer, my child," the hag murmured. "I know you're out there. I can smell your sweat and your fear and your blood. Come to me, and I will hide you where no one will ever find you." Anna Sophia had heard the stories, and she wondered if old Nona's hiding place was a shallow grave deep in the woods. But if she went back, if La Migra took her and sent her away, her father had warned that she would likely end up with the dead hijas of Juarez, violated and forgotten beneath the desert dirt. And there were stories, just a few, that sometimes old Nona took pity. Hunger and desperation made Anna Sophia bold. She crossed herself and then limped into the dim light cast by the open doorway. "I'm here, Abuela." Old Nona sniffed the air again and turned her dark eyes toward Anna Sophia. "Come closer," she repeated. Anna Sophia raised one hand to clutch the crucifix on the necklace at her throat, but she obeyed. She took one stumbling step, then another, leaving drops of blood on the ground. She stopped in front of the old woman, who stood at the top of 3 rickety steps, framed in the warm light. Old Nona sniffed once more, peering at Anna Sophia. "Who hunts you, child?" Anna Sophia took a deep breath to steady her voice. "La Migra, Abuela. They took my family. I can't go home. I have no one, nowhere to go." "Come inside," old Nona said. "Eat." Anna Sophia desperately hoped that she would be the one doing the eating, but she mustered her courage and limped up the steps. Inside, the trailer was filled with old furniture. Kerosene lamps lit the cramped space. A wood stove served for warmth and cooking, and on it simmered a pot of stew. A loaf of bread sat on a worn kitchen table. Old Nona set a chipped bowl full of stew in front of Anna Sophia and a thick slab of bread with butter. "Eat," she said, "and tell me your story." Anna Sophia was so hungry that she wanted to wolf down the food, but she remembered her manners. "Thank you, Abuela," she said. Old Nona watched her as she ate, sitting silently, one bony leg crossed over the other. When Anna Sophia was finished, she wiped her mouth and thanked her host again, then told her story. Her voice shook, but she kept herself from weeping, though her eyes filled with tears. "Why did you come here, child?" old Nona asked. "I was lost," Anna Sophia replied. "It was an accident." Old Nona chuckled. "There are no accidents," she replied. "The forest found you and brought you here." She paused. "Where would you go?" Anna Sophia shook her head. "I have nowhere to go, no one to help. I can't go back. They'll send me away. If they send me away, I'll die." Old Nona regarded her for a moment, then nodded. "I can hide you here," she said, "in the back of the holler. You'll be safe there." "Will I die?" The words were out of Anna Sophia's mouth before she could stop herself. Old Nona chuckled, a wheezing, dry sound. "Everything dies sooner or later, but no, not now. Change, yes, not die. And if La Migra comes for me, what then?" "If they come, I will deal with them," old Nona said. "You won't have to fear them anymore." "What will it cost me?" Anna had heard the old tales. She knew that witches wanted something in return. "Loyalty," old Nona replied. "There are others like you who have come to me for safety, others I've hidden. I protect them, and they protect me. You won't be alone." There was no turning back. There hadn't been, not after Anna Sophia fled into the night. If she went back, even if she found her way, La Migra would take her, send her across the border to the dying place. Anna Sophia had heard her parents whispering about what happened to the daughters of Juarez. Nothing could be worse than that. "I accept." Anna Sophia lifted her chin, tried to summon all her courage. "Come with me." Old Nona led Anna Sophia into the night. They walked a little ways past the back of the old mobile home on its metal chicken legs to a round saucer-like boat tied up by the side of the creek. Its wide brim and shallow bowl reminded Anna Sophia of her mother's mortar and pestle, the tools she used to grind herbs and avocados. "Step in, child. I'll take you to the safe place." Old Nona stepped into the boat sure-footedly despite her bony legs. She waited until Anna Sophia crouched in the saucer, then loosed her boat from its mooring and pulled them along with her willow oar. The night flew past them, filled with strange noises. Old Nona did not carry a lantern. She knew the creek, and the creek knew the way. The forest was thick here, old growth, not often seen in these parts, where loggers and their axes had stripped everything of value long ago, but not in old Nona's holler. Moonlight filtered down through the branches. Now and again, Anna Sophia saw the glow of eyes watching from the brush. An owl hooted. Another seemed to answer far away. Fireflies glowed, or perhaps, Anna Sophia thought, it was fairies dancing. Anything was possible. She shivered, remembering that fairies were not always nice. The stream swept them deeper into the holler, and the moonlight did not follow. Huge old trees hunched over the stream, forming a tunnel so dark that Anna Sophia could not even see old Nona and the boat beside her. Without sight, her hearing grew sharper. She heard animals padding along the creekside and night birds on the wing. Crickets chirped and insects buzzed. The world smelled of wet dirt and green leaves, loam and flowers. When the boat emerged from the tunnel of branches, Anna Sophia blinked. Even the dim moonlight seemed bright to her eyes. A small number of men and women clad in deerskin were waiting along the bank of the creek. Anna Sophia squinted to see them more clearly. Something was different about them. "We're here," old Nonna said, and pulled them to the shore. Anna Sophia hung back, shy and fearful. Old Nonna reached out a wrinkled arm and took Anna Sophia by the hand. Old Nonna's hand was bony but very strong, and she pulled Anna Sophia along. "I have brought you a sister," old Nonna said. "Men took her family away. She has nowhere to go." One of the group, a dark-haired woman just a little younger than Anna Sophia's mother, stepped forward. She had a kind smile, but something about her eyes made Anna Sophia pause. "She'll be safe here. We'll care for her, help her make the adjustment." Anna Sophia turned to old Nonna, suspicions rising in her mind. "You said I would change. How?" One large wolf and then another and another padded from the bushes as if they understood her question. Anna Sophia drew back in fear, expecting them to leap for her throat, expecting to die. Instead, the wolves walked up to old Nonna and sat down around her. More wolves stirred in the woods until a pack of nearly 20 wolves and 5 people stood on the banks of the creek. The wolves were large and beautiful. Some were gray, others reddish-brown, some charcoal-colored. Their amber eyes gazed at her, and she glimpsed the human souls within. They did not rush her like wild beasts or nuzzle her like dogs. Instead, they kept a respectful distance, studying her and allowing her to study them. "These are my children," old Nonna said. "They have the run of the back of the holler, the mountains, and the caves. No one dares bother them here. Deer are plentiful, and the caves are warm in the winter." "Does it hurt to become a wolf?" Anna Sophia asked. She could not look away from the magnificent creatures. "Only the first time, child," the woman who had greeted them answered her. "We will help you make the change." "Are you a wolf too?" The woman nodded. "A few of us keep our human shape most of the time to help old Nonna when she needs it. We're the newest changed. The old ones come to like the fur bodies. When we wear the wolf, we are fast, silent, powerful. We own the forest and we never go cold or hungry." She smiled. "The time will come when new ones will take our place, and we will take the fur forever. But for now, we will stand watch with you. We will be your pack, and you will be our family." "Thank you," Anna Sophia said quietly. She was still afraid, and she was certain the wolves could smell her fear. But part of her longed to know what it was to be one of Los Lobos. Desire won over fear, and she raised her head to look from the woman back to old Nonna. "Gracias. Thank you. I must go." Without a backward glance, old Nonna walked back to the round boat and climbed aboard, hiking her skirts around her bony legs. She pulled her way into the swift current of the creek and vanished into the darkness of the forest. A short time later, old Nonna pulled to the side of the creek behind her trailer. She tied up her boat and scrambled out onto the bank, then put the pole back in place for the next time. Old Nonna stopped and sniffed the air. Her wandering eyes saw strangers crashing through the brush, blundering their way through the forest, men with boots trampling down the plants, breaking their way among the branches, frightening off the animals with their big, bright flashlights. The dogs had deserted their masters, understanding the dangers. But the men came anyway, sure that they were the masters of this land. Old Nonna smiled a terrible smile. She was inside her trailer and sitting at her table when the men came to her door. One of them marched right up her steps and pounded as if she were deaf. The whole forest had heard them coming. Even the dead had heard their clumsy, heavy footfalls and their loud breathing. Old Nonna opened the door. "Can I help you?" The big man stood on her stoop, crowding her doorway, uninvited and cocksure of himself. His shoulders were broad and his chest was wide, and his black jacket had letters on it announcing his power. Beneath the jacket, old Nonna was certain that he had a gun. He trusted in those things to keep him safe. But the holler knew the truth. "We're looking for a fugitive, a young girl, Latina, illegal. We believe she may have come this way." His tone and the set of his jaw conveyed his expectation that she would automatically defer to him, obey him without question. It was the way his world worked. Old Nonna could see that the large man was trying to look past her into the trailer. He did not look at her because he had already made up his mind what he would see. A crazy old woman was with little use to him. "Perhaps she went deeper into the holler," old Nonna suggested. "There are more trailers back there. Sometimes we get fugitives." Big man had assured himself there was nothing here of interest. "How do I get there?" Just follow the creek, old Nonna said with a smile that showed her broken brown teeth. You'll see the trailers. Probably catch folks just in time for dinner. Thanks, ma'am. He gave a curt nod, then motioned the other men to follow him around the back, down to the black waters of the swift creek. Big Man and his friends would blunder their way down the creek through the darkness, announcing their arrival with their bright lights. They would find the trailers and cabins in the back of the holler. His kind were meant to find them. Her children would have guests for supper. Old Nonna shut the door and poured herself a cup of tea. That story is in the Big Bad 2. It is Old Nonna, and it's also in Unlikely Heroes, which is a collection of 3 short stories that are a little different for what I usually write, and that collection is available for 99 cents on Kindle. I'm Gail Z. Martin, and thanks for listening. I'll see you online.